Hello everyone and welcome to our second video for our EdTech training series, specifically looking at how to pass the Google Level 1 certification exam. Now, the first video was really all about the layout of the course and kind of what to expect. This video, we're actually getting into some of the meat of the course. It's still pretty much an introduction because we're just going to talk about Gsuite for education, what that means, what products are offered to teachers to help us with our own classroom learning and teaching. But I want to start by saying that, just like I said in episode 1, I'm going to do my best to also offer audio-only versions of this because I know that it's very difficult to sit down and watch a YouTube video all the time. So you can find a podcast that I created that has pretty much all the same exact information, a little bit lengthier at times because audio tends to be a little bit longer than just video because there's no visual component. So as you can see here, if you search EdTech Training with Michael Krauszer or just type in my name in Spotify, you will see the episodes when they're released. As you can see here, there's already episode 1, the introduction, and episode 2, which is actually what this video is covering. Now, on my YouTube channel, this will correspond with the videos as well. So there is a video on the introduction, and there is a video for this. Now, I will admit, the first 2 episodes, I didn't really have to do a video. It's not very conducive to doing a video, but I did it, again, for those that like to learn better that way. Now, here, I am going to show you some of the apps that I talk about and some of the information that I talk about. But again, I really do think that the podcast is more conducive to it and a little bit easier to follow along. But if you actually like seeing some of these things, then by all means, continue watching. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my Google Doc of my show notes really for the podcast that I did, which is already up there. It's episode 2. So I want to start off by saying Gsuite for Education refers to all the Google products that are offered to teachers. Now, the biggest thing that I can tell you guys is you should remember that all of them have to do with collaboration, communication, and efficiency. If those show up on a multiple choice question and you see as an answer collaboration, or you see communication or something about time management or being more efficient, those are probably the answer choices that you should pick. I come across them a lot, and you can do this at the Teacher Center hub as well with Google. Again, I showed you guys this last time too. I'll go back over, but it looks like this, the Teacher Center. You could go to the fundamentals course like right here, and they give you practice questions, and everything that you need is right here. I do recommend going through this at your own pace. It is a little tedious at times. You will know a lot of this stuff already, but at the very least, the questions are helpful. So if you come across some of those questions and you see collaboration, you're probably safe picking it. Now, over time, the Teacher Center page actually does cover every program that Google offers. There's a lot of them, but obviously some take up more space than others. And it's the same thing in this course. We're going to be covering all of what they offer, but there's definitely going to be some that we're going to talk about more. And even today, when I give an overview of 16 different apps and program that Gsuite offers, that's still not all of them. There's a couple that are actually not on the list, but they're pretty minor. So let's get started though. The first one that I want to talk to you about is Google Drive. Now, a lot of you are familiar with Google Drive, but you might not use it. Some of you, on the other hand, probably use it a lot. Now, it's unlike all the other apps that we're going to talk about because this is literally the hub for everything. Everything works out of Google Drive and everything is originated in Google Drive. And so I'm actually going to show you. If you go to drive.google.com, you'll see my Google Drive here. Now, full disclosure, I'm in the process of reorganizing my Google Drive. I deliberately did not organize it yet, and I actually took some things out and I made it more messy. Like if you look here, I have a lot of folders, and these are a lot of different Google Classroom classes. There's a much better way to organize this, but I wanted to wait and actually show you guys how I might organize all this stuff when we get to the Google Drive unit next time. So as you can see here, I have a lot of different folders. You can notice you can color coordinate them, but again, I deliberately did not start doing that yet because I want to wait to actually show you. I deliberately made my Google Drive a little bit messy right now to show you guys a little bit more. But Google Drive, at its heart and soul, is just your online hard drive. Everything is saved here, but everything also originates from Google Drive. So when you use Google Docs, and as you can see here, I have a couple of Google Docs right here that I opened recently. It's actually originating from Google Drive. Same thing with Google Slides. Here's a Google Slide logo. It's actually originating from Google Slides. And here's Google Forms. So if you were to hit New, you can see on the left-hand side all of the product offerings. So Google Docs, and then you can create a new blank document, Google Sheets, Google Slides. Now, if you go straight to Google Docs or you go straight to Google Slides, that's really just a shortcut. You're still using Google Drive. You're just bypassing going here first, which is completely fine. But for the Gsuite exam, for the Google Level 1 exam, it's better if you do everything out of Google Drive because they actually give you those directions. I'm not going to tell you more than that because I can't, but just get familiar with starting everything from this page. On your own, don't worry about it after this course. Don't worry about it. Just go straight to Google Docs, Google Slides, whatever. But for now, always go to Drive first, and you could bookmark it actually by hitting the little star up above, and you could do that for any website, and then hit New, and then any of the apps that you want to use. So Google Drive is actually very useful, specifically for teachers because it's unlimited storage for free. That's gold. But the problem is, as you can see here, I have a lot of files. I've used 188 gigs. I've had this same Google Drive account for about 6 years. But if I want any of these things, if I were to stop working at our school, I would need to back all of this up. So anything you save on your work drive and you think you'll want to keep if you ever stop working at your current school, at our current school, you're going to want to back up because you don't carry this drive with you when you go because it is specific to your job. It is specific to the school that you work at. And that goes for any school. You don't get to carry the email address of the job if you no longer work there, which means you don't have access to any of this stuff anymore. So back it up on your computer, back it up on your personal Google account, doesn't matter. Just be aware of that. But Google Drive is important to know because it is the parent category for everything else. Now, the second app that I want to talk about is Google Classroom. And you guys are all familiar with this at this point, especially middle school and high school teachers. They tend to use it more. I have heard of elementary school teachers using it in different schools. I know ours did not, but certainly there are teachers out there as young as 4th grade, I've heard, using it and using it pretty consistently. But if you go to classroom.google.com, this is Google Classroom. You can create classes, you can join classes and be a part of them. And again, all of this stuff is backed up on Google Drive. When you create a Google Classroom, it creates a Google Drive folder for you. So anything you put on Google Classroom, except for the announcements and except for comments, but any files and assignments that you create and any files and submissions students make all get backed up in the Drive, which is why you see here there's names of some of my Google Classrooms in my Google Drive. Now, Google Classroom at its heart, and I'll go into our own training, Google Classroom at its heart is a way to organize, again, there's that efficiency category, collaborate, and communicate with your students, right? Your classwork page is where you can upload all of your work and assignments, and it's also where you can assign some grades, and you can have a grade book. You can make announcements and communicate with parents and students alike. It is your way of organizing, it is your way of communicating, and it is your way of giving feedback and grades. So we got the two big ones out of the way, and now we're going to go to more collaboration-focused apps. And the first one is Google Docs. And this is what I'm in right now. This is a Google Doc. It is just a word processor. Now, a lot of people think that Google Docs is actually lower on the list of tech-focused things and that the most that you can do with it is a hyperdoc, but I actually think that's pretty cool. And a hyperdoc is just as simple as if I were to highlight any any one of these words in this doc, I can insert a link by right-clicking or hitting Control K, and I could link to other things. So in theory, you could have a live Google Doc. You could essentially call it a worksheet, although it's much more than that. And if you want your students to have resources, you can have hyperlinks in here that take them to those resources. If you want to have an entire lesson plan on here that a student follows, you could do it right there. For a long time in my classes, every single one of my lessons was actually in Google Docs, and I gave all of my students access to it and their own copy, and they were filling out the Google Doc as we went along. So we had different sections. If we had a do now, the do now would be up at the top, and they'd have to answer the questions. If there was a form that they had to fill out, it would link to it. Everything was embedded here. I've since moved all of that to Google Slides, but I still really like Google Docs. So it is a word processor online, much like a Microsoft Word that many people are familiar with, but it can do a lot. You can insert pictures, tables, you can insert other things from different Drive documents. You could do a lot. Now, Google Sheets is essentially your Microsoft Excel, but for Google. And you could go there by going to sheets.google.com. Now, notice the trend here too. If you ever want to go to any of these sites, it's just the name of it, .google.com. So it was docs.google.com, drive.google.com, classroom.google.com, and this is sheets.google.com. And it'll bring you to your main page of Sheets, and any of the sheets that you've made are there. You could create a blank one, and it's just data, right? And you could input data, but really it's also for visualizing that data by inserting graphs, by going to data and sorting the views. You can create different types of graphs. You can create forms out of this. You could do a lot with it. Google Sheets is one of those things that if you're math oriented, usually people love it. And if you get used to using Google Sheets, you can become a master at it, and it can prove to be very, very helpful. Now, number 5 is also tied in with Google Sheets. Like, the two kind of work hand in hand. Anything that you do in number 5, which is Google Forms, anything you do in Google Forms can be downloaded into Google Sheets. And you can actually create forms within Google Sheets. It's just a little harder and, in my opinion, unnecessary, but it is nice that the two are kind of paired off. Now, just like before, ask yourself, how could you get to Google Forms if you wanted to? Now, you could do it by typing in Google Forms and going to the web page that way. You could be on a Google page, and on the right-hand side, click on the little dots, the Google Apps button. Other people call it the Google waffle. You click on that, and then you find Forms. Or you could do what I just told everybody before. You take the name, and then you put .google.com. So I'm going to go forms.google.com, and it is going to bring me straight to that page. Now, Google Forms is really nice for teachers because you could use it to create surveys. You can use it to create pre-assessments, post-assessments, exit tips. You could even make it into a lesson plan, and it's taking forever to load right now because of my internet, but it is getting there, I promise. But to go back to this, though, you could use it as a survey. You could use it as your assessor of students. I've seen teachers use it to gather feedback at parent-teacher conferences with parents. So they'll give parents the link, and they'll use it that way. Even back-to-school night. I used it once for back-to-school night. I gave all my parents a link, and I said, if you would like to fill this out and tell me more about your kid, how you think they learn, what they're like, anything that you feel like I, as their teacher, should know, please just tell me. And they do that. I've seen other teachers use it with their students as a learning style inventory. So there's so many different ways. Younger kids, you could use it as a choose your own adventure type of story. You could train students and teach students how to make their own forms. And I've done that before as well, having them make their own quizzes and tests and kind of collaborate with team members on that. But Google Forms looks like everything else. Again, it originates in Google Drive. They already have ready-made templates. And if you notice, the templates are all educationally focused. Worksheet, assessment, exit ticket, or blank quiz. So you could create templates if you want, or you could just hit a new blank document, new blank form, and you have a bunch of different questions that you can ask. You can embed images, you can embed YouTube videos, you could give direct feedback. And again, one of the big things that Google focuses on for the Level 1 exam and being a certified educator is that all of these programs can help with collaboration, can help with also feedback. So if you gave a multiple choice pre-assessment or even a quiz, say you're a history teacher, science teacher, whatever, and you're giving a multiple choice test, it could be the same one that you give on paper. The only difference now is I would actually argue that a worksheet in a Google form is better than a hard copy worksheet. And I know people, some educators are swearing off worksheets right now, busy work, whatever. I'm not willing to go that far with it, but I'm all about getting better. Nobody's going to be able to change the way that they teach overnight, but you can do it gradually. So just imagine for a second, you take a regular multiple choice test, quiz, or worksheet that you have, and you put all those same questions onto this Google form right now. Well, when you make this into a quiz and you can choose an answer key, you have an option to give feedback. And so I'll make this into a quiz, and right now I have a question here. It's untitled. I'm just going to do scribble scrabble, right? But when I choose on answer key, there's now a spot for add answer feedback. And I can put feedback for incorrect answers, or I could put feedback for correct answers. And I can insert links or even a YouTube video. So it could actually be a YouTube video of me explaining why the answer is the correct one, or explaining why the incorrect answer choices are incorrect. And it could be self-grading, which is great with Google Forms, because now the students get immediate feedback. And if feedback is ever an answer choice on an exam for Google, probably going to be the answer. Again, they love collaboration, they love communication, they also love feedback. And that's really what Google Forms allows for. Now, longer answers, of course, won't have that direct feedback, but you can actually embed it. You could give a sample answer. So it is this direct feedback, because that's one of the things that a traditional classroom doesn't have, because the students might take a test and they might not get it back for a week. And at that point, how much do they actually remember of why they chose an answer that they did? Right? So they're not as invested. But here they could take it and know their score immediately. So moving on from there, one of my personal favorites, number 6, is Google Slides. It is like PowerPoint, and it is very useful. I actually use Google Slides for our lessons, and I've showed you that before as well, and I'll pull it up now too. Like, these are going to be all of our lessons. So you could do it as lesson plans. You can do it as interactive, like a hyper slide, just like a hyperdoc, where you're telling students what to do. You're adding instructions. You could embed videos. You can embed sound. You could embed Google Forms like I did here, where this picture is actually clickable. It brings them to a form. You can do a bunch of stuff with Google Slides. And again, you could collaborate. So students can use Google Slides as well, not just to create in-class presentations, but maybe to create videos, maybe to create an instruction manual on something for like a process speech, a recipe. They can collaborate, and every single student in the class has their own slide, and they're adding notes to the specific slide on a specific topic so that all the notes are in one place for everybody. So there's a lot. Now, very similarly, and often confused with, is number 7, Google Drawings. Now, Google Drawings is essentially Google Slides Lite. Google Drawings is intended to just make graphics, pictures, flowcharts, organizers, stuff like that. And Google Slides can do all of that. It really can, which is why I prefer just going to Google Slides. But some people like Google Drawings as a standalone. I really do think that everything you do in Google Drawings, for the most part, can be in Google Slides. Although I have seen people use Google Drawings for like online whiteboard, stuff like that. But again, we're going to get there a very similar way. We're going to go to drawings.google.com, and it's going to bring it up. And it looks almost like Google Slides, but you see you only have one, and you have the little checkerboards in the back, and there's not as much as you can do like in Google Slides. Like Google Slides, look at all of these. You have add-ons. You can do different things for transitions with your slides. You can insert a lot more. You have all of your slides on the left here that you can see. You can change backgrounds, whereas here it's a little bit more plain. I mean, you can still insert shapes, you could still insert tables and charts and word art and stuff like that, add comments, you can still collaborate, but this isn't really intended to be a presentation. This is usually something that you'll end up downloading and maybe put it in a presentation, but it's not intended to be the presentation, whereas Google Slides is. So just keep that in mind. Google Drawings is sometimes questions on the exam. They can ask you some scenarios based on it. So just play around with it for a little bit, but I wouldn't focus too much of your time on it because Google Slides is the more flexible tool. Now, we're going to move to the efficiency-focused apps here. Now, that's not to say that the next handful of apps cannot be collaborative, because they can. Almost every single one of these can be used for both efficiency and collaboration, but it's usually not the main intent. So the first for the efficiency-focused and the 8th overall Gsuite app is Gmail. Now, that's right, it's your email. And you might you might be thinking right now, well, I know what Gmail is. I use it on a daily basis. I can send emails. That's great, but it's more than just emails. You can actually create tasks. Obviously, you can communicate with people, but you could also communicate with people through the chat feature, which is actually tied into Google Hangouts. So don't mind my very cluttered email right now with a lot of these things that I have to sift through because it is summer. I haven't been looking at it as closely, but on the left-hand side, you can see that you have people down below that you've contacted, and you can click on them and you can start a chat, right? You can have different notes in your Gmail. You can have your chats come up right here on the left-hand side as well. You could schedule out emails, which is great if you want to send an email and it's late at night and you don't want somebody thinking that you're crazy person who's up at 2 a.m. You could schedule it out to be released at a certain time. You can also create categories and manage labels. Now, those are two really big things that you should know how to do in Gmail that the exam will normally ask for, because it's a basic function of it, but it's unfortunately something that not a lot of people do. And I'll admit that I don't spend too much time creating categories and labels for my emails, but I do admit that it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and just it's one of those things that I drag my feet in, but I think I'll be inspired to try it again. And the purpose for it is if you label certain emails, you can keep track of them better. So if you want to label emails as being for students, right? Every time a student sends you an email, you label it. Eventually, Gmail is going to learn what you're doing, and whenever you get an email from a student, it's going to start filtering it right in there. Same thing with parents. And that way it's easier to find as well. Now, be familiar and play around with the options feature of Gmail, which is in the right-hand corner, the little gear settings button. You can have a lot of different options that you pick, including the layout of it, the theme that you have, how everything is kind of formatted for you. If things are going to be on the right, the left. There's a lot of different settings that you can have. And then there's also advanced features that you can go to and actually play around with. So spend a little bit of time actually getting to know your Gmail. It is something that we'll cover later on in the course as well at length. So that way I'll teach you guys how to do all of this. But just as a quick snapshot, on the right-hand side, for me, it might be different for you guys, is you should have these 3 buttons. You should have Google Calendar, Google Keep, and Google Tasks. Get to know some of these and how they're working with Gmail. And again, I'm going to leave it at that because we will cover it later on. Now, 9th on the list is actually Google Calendar. Google Calendar is your way of scheduling meetings, adding appointment slots. You could schedule online Google Meets for video conferencing. And what's really neat about it for teachers is even if you don't or haven't used Google Calendar, at least not religiously yet, Google Classroom kind of makes you do it without realizing it. When you create a Google Classroom and you assign something a due date, it shows up as its own Google Classroom. As its own Google Calendar, excuse me. So what that means is if I have a 9th grade English class and I assign a paper due on Thursday, I now created a calendar when I created the class automatically. So if I go into my Google Calendar, it would show 9th grade English. And then guess what? If I went to Thursday, I would see, oh, there's a paper due at 9 a.m. Now, the thing that I love more about me being able to see that is the students get to see it. So it's something that I think all of us should show our students how to use their Google Calendar and even put it on their phones, because mine's on my phone and it works wonders because I'm able to let Google Classroom schedule things just like normal when I assign something, and it automatically puts it in my Google Calendar, which means if I'm a student, guess what? If my teacher assigns something, it's automatically in my calendar. And so when they look on their phone and they look at their calendar, it becomes a to-do list, which is really helpful. And number 10 on the list is video conferencing with Google Meet. Now, this often gets confused with Google Hangouts. Google Hangouts is very similar. You can do video conferencing and you can do instant messaging. But don't quote me on this, but I think they're phasing out Google Hangouts and making Google Meet replace it entirely. Again, don't quote me on it, but that's what I think I read and what I think is going to happen. But if somebody has different information, please let me know. So Google Meet is video conferencing. It's also in some levels a chat service, and it's constantly being updated. In fact, it just got new updates to make it more like Zoom. So there's breakout rooms. You could raise your hand. You have different toggles for like how you see the participants of the video. So there's a lot that you can do with it now, and it's getting better and better. So definitely check it out. Definitely know how to use it. You'll probably get some questions on the exam about it, but my guess is you won't have a scenario for it. But again, that's just my guess. They have so many different pools of questions that they could ask from to where everybody gets a different test. So I wasn't asked about Google Meet, but that doesn't mean that you won't be asked about Google Meet. Number 11 is Google Sites. It's one that I really like playing around with. So if I go to sites.google.com, you'll see what I see here, but Google Sites is awesome. There's an old Google Sites and a new Google Sites. So if you show up at Sites, on the left-hand side, you'll see New Google Sites or Classic Sites Manager. You always want to go to New. And it's your way of creating websites, which is really fun because you could create class websites. You could have your students create their own website and make it kind of like their own blog in their own space. And it's pretty much drag and drop. So it's pretty fun. Number 12 is Google Groups. Google Groups is a way of doing online forums and also to communicate with others. So what I mean by that is if I go to Google Groups, you could create your own group with email addresses. And we're usually by default added to some as well. So like if people wanted to email the high school staff, all they have to do is put in that one email address, highschoolstaff at our domain name, and then it'll go to everybody that's in that group. So you can do that for your students, or you could do that for parents. You can also use it as an online forum. So in theory, if you wanted an online forum just for your parents of a specific grade, you can create that. And if you give parents the right to publish stuff, they could ask questions and then people could just be answering it, much like you would do on any type of online forum. So then moving on from the efficiency and from the collaborative tools that G Suite offers, we then finish off our list with the next handful, which I'm just going to label Other because I don't know what else to call it. So number 13 is Google Chrome. That's actually what I'm using. It's an internet browser. It's one of the most popular in the world, and it works very well with Google Apps because, hey, Google owns it. So I highly recommend using Google Chrome for all of your Google education needs, especially because you're going to be asked questions about bookmarking pages, which is usually a little star at the top, having add-ons like these things that I have at the top right, extensions, how to get stuff from the Chrome store. All that stuff does appear on the test. Number 14 is YouTube. Everybody's familiar with YouTube at this point, but you're going to need to know more than just how do I search for a video. You'll need to know things like how do I make a playlist and add videos to that playlist? How do I save a video to watch later? How can I share a playlist with my class or a student or a colleague? How can I share an individual video? And how can I create my own videos and post them? Number 15 is a little bit more unorthodox in terms of education because not too many people think of using this. Google Maps and Earth. Now, you don't have to know too much about these for the Google Level 1 certification, but it is interesting to play around with because we think of Google Maps of it just being our GPS system. But there's teachers out there, and Google advocates for this too, that use it as part of their lessons. History teachers use it to show a street view of a specific area, to show how far away different places are. They use Google Earth to show satellite views, to show more specific geographic regions or how much of the Earth is covered in water. There's a lot that you can do with it. I've seen teachers in history and English both kind of plot out places that an author has been or that a historical place has taken place, and they kind of make it their own little virtual tour. So then we round out the entire list with the last one, which is Blogger. Blogger is just like it sounds like. It's a website for blogging. You can create your own free blog, much like WordPress does and other sites, but this is just Google run, Google led. Not a lot of people are using this anymore, at least from what I see. I did have students years ago create their own blogs, and I had one as well, and we played around with it. Wasn't something that I wanted to keep too much because I like the YouTube and the Google Sites more, and I do blogging and Google Sites with my students. So I don't really use Blogger, but it is something that we will spend a very small amount of time on. Same thing with Google Maps and Earth. We'll spend a small amount of time on those. We will spend more time on the more flexible, more versatile tools. So now that we have the list out of the way, we want to get a little bit more practical. And we're going to consider a couple of fake scenarios and then use some of these apps to apply them to the classroom. And this is very similar to what the Teacher Training Center does for you as well. So please go there and take some practice questions. So the first scenario is, imagine that you're going into your class and you hear students constantly talking about how they're on YouTube. There's a viral video going around they want to show you, they want to show their friends. And now you got to ask yourself, how can you leverage such a popular platform like YouTube in your class? Well, there's a few ways that you can do it. And this is just a few. You could come up with an endless amount of ways to utilize YouTube. But some of the more common ones is you could actually have your students watch and then reflect on YouTube videos for the subject matter. Maybe they're supplementing the textbook. Maybe you're steering them towards crash course videos or history videos or science videos. Some that are lecture-based and they're replacing your own lecturing. Some are maybe supplementing yours, or some are more practical. Like maybe you learn something in science and then there's like a Mythbusters clip or something that's more high interest. And then you could have them reflect on it. And guess what? You could use other Google tools to have them do that. So now you're tool stacking, right? You're stacking one tool on top of the other. So you're now not just using YouTube. You might also use Google Docs because you want them to submit a reflection. Or maybe you want them to create their own YouTube video, right? Maybe you'll use Google Slides. They have to present something that they learned from the video. Maybe you use Google Forms to assess them on what they learned from the video. Another option is maybe you make your own YouTube videos that cover the concepts from class. Or thirdly, have them make YouTube videos that apply concepts from class. So that's one scenario. Let's consider a second one. The second scenario is, let's pretend that you're a physical education teacher and you rightfully want to teach about exercise, nutrition, different sports, sportsmanship. So what can you do? What are some of these Gsuite apps that you might be able to think about and use? Well, I have a few ideas here. And again, these are just a few ideas. You could come up with more. You could create a Google site and you post blog entries or videos of workouts. Maybe you create a Google site and you have a different page for every sport, or you have a different page for different training modalities, or you have a different page for different diets that you've heard of and that you're trying to teach, or pyramid food group. Maybe you have a Google site that you're collaborating with all your students, and every student has kind of their own section of the website they're responsible for. And some people are responsible for coming up with healthy recipes. Some people are responsible for creating workout videos. Some people are responsible for videotaping rules of a sport. The list goes on. And then you could actually pair that up or do it separately with YouTube, a second option. Maybe you create a fitness vlog that is teacher-led, or one that is a class vlog. Different student takes it each week and is responsible for making a short 5-minute vlog of kind of how they were fit for that week. Almost like a class pet, that every week a different student gets to take home the class pet and take care of it over the weekend. Well, this is, maybe every week one student is responsible for making a video to go on the fitness vlog, right? Or it could just be teacher-led. Or the students can all make their own individual one to showcase what they're learning in class. So it's not enough to just learn about the healthy food pyramid. Maybe they're posting their food online of what they're eating and the nutritional value of it. And lastly, another idea is to create Google Slides, where students can collaborate and create a slideshow presentation that they give to the entire class. Maybe they even film themselves doing it at home, and they post it to YouTube as well with their Google Slides. Or maybe the Google Slides can be an entire workout where every slide is a different exercise, and one team member could be the one that has to videotape them doing the exercise, like doing a push-up, and another person might use something like Google Drawings to actually draw out or write out the instructions of what a perfect push-up looks like illustrate it kind of, and they put that on the slide. And then slide 2 would be a different exercise, slide 3, so on and so forth. You could embed timers for people to know how long they should be doing it. And you could imagine that over a course of an entire year or an entire semester of doing this, you now have a pretty hefty slideshow of a lot of different workouts that students have created. So as you can see, there are so many possibilities with G Suite. You just need to get a little creative, and remember, always, always, always think about collaboration. Now, as we start nearing the end of this, I do want to take a brief aside and say, whenever we're discussing technology, we need to teach students how to be good digital citizens. Now, that is a popular term right now, and to me, it means using wisdom and respect online in order that everything that you do online is above reproach. Now, this is important because we know things do not get erased these days. But this is the responsibility of every teacher. This is not just the technology teacher's responsibility. This is the history teachers, the science teachers, the English teachers, the gym teachers. Every single one of us has a responsibility to model and explicitly teach what good digital citizenship is. Now, I don't particularly like the term digital citizen because it's just a little corny in my mind, but it gets its point across. You just need to be a good person online, and you need to keep yourself safe. And so that means things like modeling and also teaching how to keep information private, teaching about copyright and fair use, respectful communication, anti-cyberbullying type of stuff, changing passwords constantly, having better password strength. So that way when these kids are getting into the real world, or even right now, their data isn't breached. So it is important that we all do this and that we're all on the same page, because every single teacher has the responsibility of this. Now, why am I having this as an aside after talking about 16 different Gsuite apps? Well, because if you go to the Teacher Center and you look at the trainings for Google, they do talk about being a good digital citizen, and Google partners with Pear Deck for their Be Internet Awesome. They partner with sites like Common Sense Media and others in order to teach digital citizenship, and they provide curriculums for school. So you'll probably get some questions about it. Now, before we fully end, we also need to talk about textbooks, because usually a digital classroom is anathema to textbooks. A lot of times people that are very techie and are Google certified educators, a lot of times those people seem to give a really bad rep to textbooks. And there's a huge push in education right now to kind of ditch textbooks. There's There's even a guy with a book about it and a podcast about it, and it's actually a really helpful book and podcast. I recommend listening to it. But I will say that I am not one that actually hates textbooks. I do think that they have a negative connotation in education, and I do think that negative connotation is deserved, and I think the fault lies with all of us teachers, really, because there's an over-reliance most of the time on textbooks. We get too trigger-happy with assigning 10 pages of reading in a textbook and then answer the questions that are there. And guess what? If it's a textbook that's popular, all those questions have answers online. So it's kind of hard to not expect the students to cheat when it's so easy, right? It's kind of like leaving a little kid in a kitchen alone with a cupcake. Not going to last too long, right? So rethink that. But again, I'm not one that is a complete hater on textbooks. I think that they actually can be very helpful. They could save the teacher time and energy. They provide a good baseline. And sometimes textbooks that adhere to standards as well can give great project ideas and can be very good for your curriculum. But the textbook is not actually your curriculum. And it should not be what drives your curriculum. And it should not be what dictates your teaching. Now, I'm not advocating for abolishing textbooks. I'm really not. But I am advocating that if you're a person that uses the textbook a lot, great, keep doing it. But maybe consider a compromise now, and your growth can be in this area. Maybe instead of only doing textbook, maybe now you start to supplement the textbook with digital resources, which could be something like this. Maybe you collect current events and put it in a Google Doc and link to all those articles like a hyperdoc that corresponds with each chapter of the textbook or certain sections of the textbook. So if it's a history or science and you're learning a specific thing in chapter 1, maybe you have a list, a hyperdoc that has 5 different articles that you link to that apply the concept that the textbook's talking about. That's one idea. Another idea is maybe you curate, kind of like a museum person would, a YouTube video playlist that covers the same topics that you find in the textbook. Right? Because now you have multiple ways that your students can learn. So those that are a little bit more visual can not only read, because reading is important. I don't want them to just choose one or the other, but it does provide a good mix. I mean, think of it this way as well. We don't like it if there's only one way that a course does something, right? If we're taking a course right now, grad school, whatever, and we're trying to learn something, and it's only provided in a textbook, we're going to get bored with it. But if it's a textbook plus current events and magazine articles and maybe part of a movie, some movie scenes, YouTube videos that are engaging, podcasts that help, all of that stuff can be helpful in our learning and make it more robust. So if you're a person that relies heavily on a textbook, I just encourage you to keep that as your practice right now. You don't have to phase it out yet, and you never really have to phase it out completely because it is still helpful, but step up your game a little bit and now supplement your textbook with some digital resources. And maybe at the end of a year of doing this, you have a very lengthy and robust digital companion to your textbook that you can use for years to come and just keep updating it. So in conclusion, there really is a lot to consider about using technology in the classroom. And I know if you're like me, you might learn things in this course, or even right now, talking about all these different apps, and your brain juices are flowing, and you're thinking of all these different ways that you can implement stuff into your classroom, and you have so many ideas, and you're excited about it. But then you don't actually go and implement any of it because you kind of feel overwhelmed. Because when you have so many targets, you kind of don't know how to make a decision and pick one. Right now, I gave you an overview of 16 different apps, and you're like, okay, but that's a lot right now. How do I know how to get started if there's so many forks in the road here? So my encouragement is, while you're going through this course, just start small. we are going to practice almost every single one of those apps that I talked about, some in more length than others, and you are going to learn each one. But maybe right now you pick out one of the 16 that you want to learn more about, and you start gathering ideas on how you can use the program in your classroom. Right? So maybe let's say you're picking Google Docs. You, in the next week, watch some YouTube videos, read some articles on how teachers are using Google Docs in the classroom. Right? Google search it. Using Google Docs in the classroom. Using Google Docs in history class. Using Google Docs in elementary school. Google those terms, see what comes up, and brainstorm it and create a document yourself where you host all of your brainstorming. And you know what? Take it a step further. Collaborate with another teacher to help your brainstorming. Maybe you create a table. One side is your thoughts and ideas. The other side is another person's thoughts and ideas. Link to the articles that you're reading or the videos that you're watching. And then you could share this with other people as well. So that way you do the work kind of for them and it creates this great document. Because again, collaboration is key. So that's what I want you to do. And that's the assignment and task that you have to do now. Is I want you to brainstorm, and you're actually going to submit your brainstorming document. And I don't care if it's actually in a Google Doc. It could be a video if you want. It could be a Google slide. Especially, I would say, keep it with whatever you're trying to learn for the most part. So if you're trying to learn Google Docs and that's what you picked, then make a Google Doc of your brainstorming. If you're trying to learn Google Slides, make a Google Slides of your brainstorming. Now, some of the other apps are harder to host your brainstorming, but I think you get the idea. Don't fire blindly into the educational technology space because you're going to miss. Instead, be specific and targeted in your learning. And if you do that, you're going to be much better off. So again, your task now is choose one of the 16 that I talked about. You could go back and listen to it. It's everything from, don't choose Google Drive or Google Classroom because those we're going to talk about a lot very soon. I would say choose any numbers from number 3 to number 16 to get to learn more of right now. Do some research, do some reconnaissance of these apps, and then practice using them. Collaborate with another individual. And again, just choose one right now. Don't try to be a master of all of these right away because that's going to be difficult. But just choose one and see what you're able to learn and collaborate with others in the course. And if you need anything, let me know.